Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on how to recruit effectively in a remote working world. Very, very topical right now. Before we get stuck into the content, just a brief introduction to me. So I'm Sophie Milliken. I'm the Managing Director at SRS Recruitment and Employability Experts. We are a graduate recruitment and employability consultancy. So very niche, and what that actually means in reality is that we work with employers to design their assessment processes and assessment materials, and we also support them with the outsourcing of their early careers talent. So we can help them with the screening of applications, telephone or video interviews, and also running their assessment centres and interviews, and ultimately helping them to hire the right graduates into their businesses. We've worked with some really big employers such as Marks and Spencer's, AXA and Expedia. And then the other side of the business is that we work with universities to embed employability within the curriculum. And we do this by running large-scale assessment centre simulations, ideally that are embedded, like I say, within the module, within the curriculum. So that has taken a bit of a battering, as you can imagine right now, but luckily we have already been working with a great deal of technology, and we have our own technology that we've been using for our in-person events for quite some time now. So we've been able to adapt, and we are now, as well as being the leading provider of assessment centre simulations in the UK, we're also now the leading provider of digital assessment centre simulations in the UK, and we've got events booked in for hundreds, probably thousands, well, yes, thousands of students now for the rest of 2020, so that's going to keep us nice and busy. Alongside that, I am the author of the best-selling book From Learner to Earner. From Learner to Earner is a book for students and graduates to help them to secure their first placement or graduate level job. I'm a pretty sociable person, so if we're not already connected, I'd love to connect with you. My preferred channels where I'm most active are LinkedIn and also over on Twitter too. So this is what we're going to look at in this session on remote working. So we're going to take a look at how you attract candidates in a remote world, then move on to the 4 key stages of the recruitment process, look at common exercises that you can use to assess candidates in a remote way, give some considerations to the technology that you're going to need to use, some top tips, and then also moving on to what we call keep warm activity. If you've not come across that phrase before, this is the activity that you would carry out in the period between offering a candidate a role and then them starting with you, which sometimes can be quite a long period of time. And then we're going to finish up on looking at some top tips around induction and how you welcome those new people in without seeing them potentially, which is the situation that we're in right now. So let's look at attraction first of all. So attraction, to be fair, attraction for quite some time now has mostly been online anyway. So gone are the days, if you're old enough to remember, of advertising jobs in the local papers or even the national papers. And pretty much everyone is advertising their jobs online these days. So there's a few ways that you can do this. So I'll actually pick off the bullets towards the bottom first of all, actually. So one of the key things is jobs boards. So things like Reed, they're a huge one, Total Jobs. There's all sorts of jobs boards out there, and then there are some niche ones. So for us in graduate recruitment, we use things like GradTouch, who are very niche towards graduates, but you will hopefully know the jobs boards that are relevant to you. You can advertise roles within these sites. You can get your vacancies pushed out to specific people. If you know your target audience, they will send out emails for you as an enhanced package. It might be that you pay extra to have a profile, an employer profile on their website. So they'll all have a variety of different packages that you can use, and they will be tailored towards your budget. So have a look at jobs boards if you are not already, because that will hugely increase the quantity not necessarily the quality, but the quantity of applications that you receive. So if that's something that's important to you, jobs boards will help with that. And then we've got social media. So have you got a real presence for your business, your brand on social media? Do you have a careers version of that you can push out job vacancies? I think it's important that if you've got lots of job vacancies or regular job vacancies, or things like graduate schemes or apprenticeship schemes, it is useful to have a specific careers branded social media page on each of the platforms. However, if it's just from time to time, or you haven't got the resource to be consistent with that, then it would be suggested that you just do it through your main brand, so from your main social media handles. So then we can have a look at things like virtual careers days or insight days. So virtual careers days, if you had ever done a careers fair, whether that be something locally or national, then you'll find that any of the organisers that have been running those in the past have been very quick to pivot and offer an online version. So if you've been on a mailing list for any careers fairs, they will be in touch with you, I'm sure, to offer you an online version. If not, a quick Google and you'll be able to find who is offering those at the moment. If you are hiring entry-level talent from university, then definitely talk to universities that are doing courses that would provide graduates that would be relevant to your vacancies, because all of the universities are doing virtual careers fairs right now, so that could be a good source for you. And I would imagine a lot of them have either reduced or completely taken away the fees that they are charging for those. So that could be a very low to no cost way of attracting. And then finally, insight days. So can you run insight days virtually to show people what it would be like to work within your organisation? This would be really good content for you to share on your social media or on the careers part of your website, if you have one of those. So really that is just an opportunity for you to show your working space, which may be virtual at the moment, maybe virtual going forward. It's an opportunity for you to invite other employees to come and talk about a particular subject or what it's like to work in your organisation, and just bring things to life and start building that connection with your candidates. So a few ideas there in terms of attraction. So you've attracted your candidates to apply for your vacancy now, and you will then want to assess them to make sure that you hire the right person or people for the roles that you have available. Now, this here is what I would describe as being the ideal model that you would follow in terms of recruiting and assessing potential candidates. You might think that some of these stages are unnecessary, and actually if you only have a small number of candidates, you might think actually we could do without one or even two of these stages. But if you do have a number of candidates and you want to put them through a fair process, then this, I guess, is the Rolls Royce of the recruitment process. So we would start in the top left there with the online application. So an online application could be as simple as sending a CV and a cover letter to you by email. That could be, as basic as it gets. It could be that you have created an application form instead that asks some specific questions that you want to score and assess against either any competencies that you use within your organisation at the moment, or behaviours or values that are important to you as an organisation. So it might be that you've already got things in place to assess, you've already got application forms, or you've already got some elements of this process. But now is a good opportunity, I guess, to revise some of that and make sure it's aligned to what you stand for as an organisation and also what the role will be offering. So it would be an online application form and or CV and cover letter. Now at this stage you could be using what we call some killer questions within your criteria, where you're stating what is essential for the role and making it clear that you won't progress anyone that doesn't meet that basic criteria. An example of this would be things like the right to work in the UK, which clearly a candidate would need to have. If you're prepared to sponsor somebody to come to the UK or remain in the UK as part of the job, then you would need to state that in your attraction process. So you could have that as a killer question. It might be that you have certain qualifications at certain levels that are very relevant to the role that you're advertising. It might be that you need someone to have a driving license because part of the role is driving. So make sure that with any killer questions that they are essential to the role and not just desirable, because if they're essential, then it's a good place to be able to sort of boot candidates out early on rather than drag them through the whole process. But you have to have something to back that up around why that is essential. So don't just say someone has to have a 2-1 for their degree. Why do they have to have a 2-1? What does it have to be in something specific, and why is that relevant to the role? So you'd have your online application first, and some people would have an application form and a CV and a cover letter, but depending on the roles that you have, that might be a bit overkill. The next stage that I've got here would actually be a test stage. And again, this is particularly relevant if you've got a high volume of candidates, because you need some way to start moving them through each of these stages so that you've got a manageable number of candidates to see at the final recruitment stage. So with tests, if you haven't used tests so far, you can have tests that are designed specifically to your organisation. This can be quite expensive unless you can negotiate a one-off fee rather than paying per test. Or you can buy off-the-shelf tests from big providers such as SHL, for example. They are a big test provider and provide tests for a number of employers. You can have tests that are ability tests, so things like numerical tests, verbal reasoning, situational judgment tests, which have become very popular in recent years. Or you can have personality tests, which are more around someone's fit for your organisation. I think it's important to be a bit wary of using generic personality tests, because if you're saying that it's for motivational fit or fit for your organisation, if they're bespoke, then that gives a bit more validity with the candidates if it's very relevant to your organisation. So tests tend to be automatic, so they're automated. The candidate would get sent a link to do the test, they complete it, and the system will be set at a certain pass mark. So you would then find out who had been successful to progress them to the next stage. The next stage then might be this one here, where we've got the telephone or video interview. There is a big trend towards people using video interviews rather than telephone interviews now, but personally, I'm still a fan of the telephone interview, because I think the great thing about a telephone interview is that you can sort of build rapport a bit easier in some ways, because you can ask questions and you can put any nerves at ease and those sorts of things in a way that you can't with a pre-recorded video interview, which has become particularly popular. Although you could do this in a face-to-face video interview, so a live video interview could work in the same way as a telephone interview. With a pre-recorded video interview, you need to buy access to a video interview platform. So some of the big providers out there are people like Sonru, Launchpad, Shine Interview. They all provide video interview services. And this is where you would create the questions in advance, record those questions, ideally with someone from the organisation, so it's a nice friendly face, and then the candidate will be sent a link to complete the video interview, which they would do at any time to suit them because it would be pre-recorded. You would then get a notification to say it's ready, this candidate's ready, and then you would go in, view it and score it. With a live video interview, you're missing some of the benefits of the pre-recorded ones in that you have to schedule a set time, which would be very similar to how you would do a telephone interview. By having a telephone or a video interview at this stage before an assessment centre or a final interview, you're just kind of doing a bit of sense checking really at this point. So this doesn't need to be a long interview if you've got that final stage coming up. It just needs to focus probably around motivation and making sure that they are genuinely enthusiastic about you as an organisation. They're excited about the role, but also that what they've said in their original application, their CV or their application form, actually matches up to reality. So you're probably going to be doing a bit of a sense check at this point and just making sure that they are suitable, they are eligible. Once you've completed that stage, you can then draw up a shortlist for an assessment centre and or a final interview stage. My personal recommendation would be that you would do an assessment centre with a final interview within it, because this can all then be done on the same day and you're not sort of dragging someone back on another day to do another part of the process. You know, you can wrap it all up in the same day. And even if you're not doing an assessment centre, I'd be saying still do a task. So often with a just an interview, it has been proven that it's not a reliable source of assessment. So, you know, we've all seen people that are great in interviews. Because I work in this field, I reckon I could probably do a really good interview in pretty much any subject, even though I've got no experience in many, many things. I think I could probably blag a good interview. But whether I could actually really do the job and whether I'm genuinely enthusiastic about that organisation is another thing. So I will talk in a bit more detail about the kinds of exercises or tasks that you could include within an assessment centre. But as part of this process, clearly you need a final element to that process. So whether that's an assessment centre and or the final interview then. So here we go, some commonly used exercises in a digital assessment centre. So I've got a few examples there. So a role play, which I think always puts a bit of fear into people. So a role play would be an exercise where you would give a candidate a scenario that they're finding themselves in. They'd probably have some preparation time to prepare for a meeting or a discussion with you as the assessor in, say, half an hour or whatever. And then you would then meet with that candidate to carry out the role play and then score that exercise. This can be good if it's for customer-facing roles or for management roles where perhaps they might have to deal with some challenging employees. You could also use this in sales roles where you're wanting to see how well they negotiate and influence others. So there are a few areas where a role play could fit well. You've then got an e-tray exercise suggested there. So an e-tray exercise does work particularly well for a digital assessment centre because it can be run one-to-one, but it can also be run within a group scenario. So you may have seen this kind of group exercise, if you like, in a face-to-face assessment centre, a real assessment centre, you know, an old school assessment centre. So you may have seen that, and it's where a candidate or a group of candidates would be given a dossier of information, so a load of scenarios, and it's kind of like their inbox, I guess, with all the priorities and all the issues that they need to deal with throughout their typical day. And it might be that they have to prioritize those issues. They might have to identify how they would tackle those issues. And as I said before, this could be done one-to-one, or it could be done within a group scenario. So either of those would work well. Alongside that, we haven't included it on the screen there, but you can do a group exercise in a digital assessment centre. That's something that we've been doing. So whether it's that you adapt an e-tray activity to be a group exercise, or whether that is to give the group just a discussion topic and ask them to come up with some solutions to something, that would work well as well. So you can do it, but you would have to give special consideration to the technology that you use to enable that to work well. Presentations, still very popular in digital assessment centres. And if you were to only just do one task alongside an interview, then that would be the one I would probably recommend, because it's very easy to set up, very easy to score, and makes a lot of sense to the candidates as well. So it might be that you ask them to present something about them. You want to find out a bit more about them. You want to find out why they're applying to you, or what attracts them about the role. So maybe something very straightforward like that. Or it might be that you just want to give them something that's very specific to the business, something that actually might give you an insight as well. So asking them to carry out a SWOT analysis on your organisation, or asking them to compare you with a competitor, for example, or talking about a new product that you are creating as an organisation and asking them for a marketing strategy or something. So something that's relevant to the role and to the organisation. So loads of things that you could do with that. And with the technology that we have now, you know, they could prepare a PowerPoint that they can share with you while they're talking through the presentation. They could, you can still run that in the same way as if it was face to face. So that works really, really well. Very easy for you to create, straightforward for them to prepare. It does take a bit of time, but actually that shows how enthusiastic they are about the job and about the organisation. And then finally, we've just got the interview there. So there tends to be two different types of interviews these days. So we have a traditional competency-based approach where you're asking the candidate to tell you about a time when they've done X, Y, and Z, and you're looking for them to give past experience and examples to illustrate how they have the correct skills for the job. Or you might take a strengths-based approach, which is becoming more popular, where you're very focused on the strengths and skills that they bring to the organisation. It's a bit more of a sort of positive approach to the interview. I'm personally still a pretty big fan on the competency base, but it depends what kind of role it is and whether the candidates are likely to have had a lot of previous experience that they can make relevant to the role that you are recruiting for. So once you've decided what your process is and what you're going to include within that, you need to think about the technology that you are going to use, because I think it's unlikely that you're just going to do everything over the phone. And we're talking about doing this remotely, so you are going to need some technology. So first off, do your research into the different kinds of platforms that are available and think about what it is that you need. If you're just doing an interview, or you're just doing an interview and a presentation even, then you're not going to need as fancy technology as you might do if you're running a full assessment day for a number of candidates in one day who you need to put into various groups to do group activities. So you need to find out what technology is going to be suitable for the needs that you have. If you know of anyone that is already operating in this space, so any other businesses, any colleagues that you've got in other organisations, they might be able to tell you what they're using and explain how that suits them, and that might then help you to decide if that would also work for you. There are some free options, and clearly there are some paid options as well. So things that I think are pretty good in terms of free. So Zoom is a bit of a classic, isn't it? And there are some free options within Zoom, although clearly the downside of those is that they are timed. So you just need to think about how long you would need. You wouldn't want to be cut off with a candidate at any point. It's not going to give the right impression. There's also another bit of software that we were using for a while before we invested more in technology, called Whereby. And that is really fun, because you can have the candidates come in and you give them the link, and they can knock on the door, and as an assessor or a hiring manager, you can see them pop up in a box, very much like I am here, and it just shows you that they're waiting to be admitted, and then you can begin the assessment there. So that's good. We now use paid Zoom accounts because we like the functionality around recording. And if you do record candidates, you must let them know that they're being recorded. But we'll use the recording functions, and we also like the fact that we've got different breakout rooms. We can use these really well for group exercises. It gives us a lot of flexibility, and people are used to Zoom now, so it doesn't tend to be an issue to get people to get that software if they haven't already. So do spend a bit of time working out which option would suit you. The other thing to give consideration to is it's not just the software to carry out the actual interview or digital assessment centre. It's thinking about how you're then going to assess these people. So what were you doing before when it was the face-to-face world? Did you handwrite your notes? Did you have criteria? Did you have tick boxes? What was it that you used? And, I'm going to suggest later on in my tips that you don't reinvent the wheel, that you adapt what you already have in terms of criteria and scoring. But what you probably will need, particularly if you're assessing a number of candidates in one day, is some kind of software to record your scores or your comments or your feedback. Because if you do it by hand, or if you type it up, it's going to be pretty painful. And you might do that if it's a one-off piece of recruitment, or it's, you know, you're just doing 1 or 2 days or something. But if this is going to be something that's going to be ongoing for you, and you're going to really embrace recruiting your future talent, or your experienced hires using a digital process, you do need to think longer term about some software. So there are a number of software providers out there. They tend to charge by the login, so there'll be a minimum fee and they'll charge by the login. So you would typically, on an assessment day, for example, where you might have 8 to 12 candidates, and also you might have maybe 4 assessors involved in that day, you would need logins for each of those people. But what a digital platform will do, will allow you to upload your criteria, will make it very easy for you to use. It's very intuitive, it's very quick. You could just potentially click on certain things that you've seen. There's usually boxes where you can write your feedback. And what that will do is it will pull all those scores together, and it will also create a feedback report for the candidate as well, which can be nice to potentially share with candidates if they're unsuccessful. Really great feedback for them. Or even if they are successful, that can also be useful as well. So if this is a long-term thing for you and you're not already doing it, then I would definitely suggest looking at some assessment software. So some top tips to make sure that all of this works together and that it is going to be successful for you. So I mentioned before about tweaking your current scoring criteria. You can also do the same with any assessment materials that you already have. So if you had a paper application form, for example, get that online, have the same questions. If you have already have your interview script, just review that and make sure that it still works if you're doing it by phone or by video. And I'm sure pretty much every question would in that scenario. If you're giving them a task, make sure that the instructions are updated so that it can be delivered online. So it's not necessarily about creating loads of new assessment materials. It's just about adapting what you've got and making sure that it works and it works well. If you are doing an assessment centre as a day and you've got a number of candidates, then I would definitely recommend identifying a tech champion, so someone that understands the software a bit more, that could just be on call, I guess, throughout the day, so that if the candidates have any issues, they can just give them a call and they can chat through with them. That's really useful, just to include who that person is and how they can be contacted in any pre-assessment day or pre-interview day communications that you send out to your candidates. Make provision for candidates who cannot access technology. So some people might be in a place where their Wi-Fi is absolutely rubbish, or they, for whatever reason, might not have access to technology. Maybe the kit that they had is broken, or they're from a disadvantaged background and they don't actually physically have the technology, and in the past they've always borrowed it and they're not able to do so at the moment. So just give a bit of thought as to what you would do if that is the case for any of your candidates. Train your hiring managers. So anyone that you've got involved in this process, if it's new to them, then they're going to need a bit of support, even if it's not the first time that they've, even if they've been involved in your face-to-face recruitment for a number of years, or for a long period of time. Doing things digitally is a bit different, and they will need to be confident in using the software so that they're giving your candidates a great first impression of you as an organisation. So even if it's just a quick familiarisation session, it's good for your tech champion to do a bit of a run through with them using the technology that you're planning to use. They can then check the Wi-Fi signal. We know we've all seen people on Zooms over recent months where we've lost people because their signal's not been so great. So all those sorts of things, just preempt any issues by giving them even a little bit of training. And then finally, to provide an extra resource, I guess, for your hiring managers, but also potentially for your candidates as well. You could produce a guide to your online recruitment process. It doesn't have to be really long. It doesn't have to be hugely detailed. It's just something that you can either use to update the careers page of your website and or be used in emails and communication that goes out to your potential candidates, but also to your managers as well, just so that the process is very clear and everybody knows what to expect at each stage. So once you've gone through all of those processes and you've actually identified the person or the people that you want to hire, it might be that you have a gap between them leaving their current job, if they're employed right now, and starting with you. And you want to keep them engaged at this point. You don't want them to renege and stay with their current employer or go elsewhere. You want to keep that communication going, because we all know that it can be very expensive and certainly very time consuming to have to go back out to market, advertise again, and go through all of that process again to get somebody else. So keep warm activity just keeps them engaged during that time before they start with you. So things that we've seen that work well, if you're using Slack as an organization, you could add them to your Slack chat, or if you have WhatsApp groups, then again, that's something that you might want to start including them in before they start. Increase the communication, so do more than you would have done normally. Do schedule a call or a Zoom, do include them in any team communications that are going out right now. Make them feel part of the team as much as possible and as early as possible, so that they're starting to build that engagement with you as an organization. And then finally, just basic suggestion, but some coffee Zooms. Is there anyone that they're going to be working with very closely? Can they meet their manager if they haven't already? Things like that. By doing that over Zoom, over a Zoom coffee in advance, it can just sort of make them feel a bit more welcome. You might want to do that as a group call or something. So a few options there. Another thing that you might want to think about maybe is actually giving them a buddy in your organisation, so somebody else that's been there for a bit longer, who perhaps can act as a bit of a sounding board that they can chat to with any concerns or questions that they've got before they start. That would be good. So you've got them in and they are raring to go, and you're inducting them. Now, we've recently inducted some new people online, and it has been so weird because we're used to having someone there physically on day one. You can take them for an actual coffee in real life and introduce them to the team and have a proper induction plan. And it's so weird. I mean, I've got someone in my team who I wasn't involved in the interview process, and she started with us literally the week of lockdown. I've never met this girl, and she's brilliant. She settled in so well, but I find it so bizarre that I've run sessions with her online, and which I've seen her on the screen a lot, but I've never actually met her yet. So very bizarre times, but we've proved that a remote induction can work. And actually, in some ways, what we've found is they're actually getting more time with people that would be out and about. So our new person, for example, has had a lot more time with me than she would have if we'd been in the office, because I'm not in the office a huge amount in normal times. I'm traveling a lot, so she probably had more time with me than she would have normally. So some things that you can do: Zoom one-to-one. So you can put all of this into an induction plan that you give to the candidate, to your new employee, in advance of them joining, and this can be part of their keep warm activity as well, just so that you're showing them what they're going to get when they start. So you can put in this plan that one-to-ones with key team members. You can have regular touch points with that person. So as their line manager, regular touch points with scheduled calls. And you know what? It is so nice sometimes just have an old-fashioned phone call rather than a Zoom, because Zoom is draining. I don't know about you, but some days I'm so zoomed out, and I've heard that one way of overcoming that is to have phone calls rather than Zooms all the time. So scheduled calls, but not always Zooms. A weekly plan, so that the new person can see what's coming up and what's what's in their diary for that week. And then to accompany that, a weekly checklist. So can you give them some tasks that they're able to do fairly easily remotely? Can you do that where you're just setting them off and they can get cracking on their own, a bit of a checklist? So whether that be things that they need to learn to do the job, whether it's actual tasks on the job, and then just check those off with them as well. Something that we found quite useful is Zoom screen share. So if we're trying to show new people how a system works, or talking through a document or whatever, you can use the screen share function on Zoom, and that makes that very easy. Another thing that I've heard happening within certain organisations is if the new person, or if even for existing team members, if they're quite a sociable bunch, then I've heard of people actually opening Zoom and having it open but still working, almost as if you've got a virtual office there. I'm not sure I would particularly fancy that myself, but that's something that is apparently happening and can work quite well for people that just want to still chat and whatnot. And then finally, staying connected. So even though you might be doing all of those things that I've listed there, you still need a bit of that social time, and you still need to be interacting with people as groups, as individuals, but in different ways. So it might be that you're having something regular as a social, or you might want to do a social for your new person or your new people, but make it good and don't do it too often. We had a chat as a team, do we want to do Friday drinks every afternoon? And we did it a couple of times, and it became a bit of a chore rather than something enjoyable. So now we still do it, but it's not scheduled. It'll just be, we're having a good week or we're having a bad week, and someone will say, oh, should we get together this Friday? And everyone will say either, no, I really am not in the right frame of mind this week, or yeah, let's do it, let's do it. And then we try and have themes. So we had one last Friday to cheer up a team member actually who was having a bit of a bad week, and we hadn't got together for a while. And one of my team members organised a countdown on Zoom, so Countdown, the programme on Channel 4. And it was really fun. She had her son in Dictionary Corner. They had some app that they could use to pull out, to do the number element and to do Dictionary Corner. And it was really good fun. It was really good. And apparently we're going to do Generation Game next time, so that'll be interesting, but we haven't decided when we're going to do that. So think about some, slightly unusual things. Who's the social person in your team? They'll come up with some great ideas, I'm sure. So yeah, so a few ideas within that. So you can induct people remotely. It's not impossible. Given that most of us are working remotely at the moment, it is our only option. And if you're still growing, brilliant, and hiring people, then that's all really positive. And you do need to have plans in place there for an induction. So I hope that's been useful. A bit of a whistle-stop tour there through remote recruitment and also bringing someone in. I am a sociable person, as I mentioned at the start, so if we're not already connected, then do connect with me on your preferred channel. I'm always happy to chat about recruitment related things or anything, to be honest. So if there's anything that I've spoken about that you're not sure about, or you'd like to discuss in more detail, if you're interested in software, assessment software, that's something that I can chat to you about as well. So plenty there, hopefully to get your teeth stuck into in terms of coming up with a process and a time frame that suits you for your recruitment needs. But hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight as to how you can make it work online. And I wish you lots of luck with all of your recruitment. Thank you very much.